should be streaming, hopefully.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool. Well, hopefully we are live, and hello everybody. Welcome back to the Erasmus Expeditions. A little bit of technical difficulties. I'm having some kind of issue with YouTube and Hangouts, and hopefully I can get it sorted. But for the time being, thank you very, very much, Megan, for setting us up with Zoom and getting this worked out, I hope. So yeah, tonight we're going to be running a one-shot. This is going to be using the Shadows Over Driftchapel adventure kit from Absolute Tabletop, and it will be set in Harbinger, the Chrome City setting that I have developed for Harbinger, as a matter of fact. So before I get everything rolling, I'm going to toss things over to my players so that they can do introductions, tell us who they're going to be playing this evening, and then we'll get rock and rolling. So first up, toss things Megan. Over to my players so that they can do.
Sorry. Hi, I'm Megan, and today I will be playing Lillian V, who is a Oathsworn Mancer. And yeah, I'm super excited to get into kind of a little bit more creepy, cerebral game. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right, next up we have Jeff.
Yes, hello everybody. I'm Jeff. I'm going to be bleh, wow, language is hard today. I'm going to be playing Hakuro. He is also a Mancer, though of a much different variety. He is an Aphelion who can basically create weapons made out of Astra and use them to fight. He's kind of coming at it from a much different angle, hopefully, from the other Mancer in the group.
Excellent. Next up, we have Jose.
Hey everybody, my name's Jose, and today I'm playing Zach as Oathsworn Guard, a Treader Mancer. I mean, not Mancer, Reaver. So definitely can't wait to go back to Chrome City.
Fantastic. All right, next up we have Emily.
Hey, I'm Emily. I'm going to be playing Noelle Bypass. She's a Mechanist Stalker, a Voidborn. She's got neon green hair. So psyched to be doing this with you guys.
Very excited as well. I think this is the first time I've gotten you in a game of mine, Emily. So even though we have played together once before, this will be the first time that I have the chance to GM for you. So I'm excited. All right, last but certainly not least, we have Steve.
Hey everybody, I'm Steve. I'll be playing Kelvin Astarter, who is a Mechanist Fixer, Wheeler turned bounty hunter and detective.
Excellent. And not currently, but in the future at some point, because we're all about the future today. You'll be able to find anyone who has a channel. You'll be able to find the links to those in the description of the video down below. So thank you very much for joining us this evening. Hopefully this will be nice and spooky. Yes, language. I use foul language. Sorry. If that and mature subject matter are things that bother you, especially with this game, you really should not watch this. Yeah. Okay, do you guys have any final questions before we get started?
1 to 10, how brutal is this going to be?
Brutal as far as your characters may not live? We'll have to kind of wait and see. But it is going to be rough. All of you need to have your sanity die figured out and sitting and ready. There's going to be a lot of checks. All right. You guys all know how the sanity system works for the Shadows Over Driftchapel? No? Okay. Then let's go over that really, really quick. I think I printed it out. I did. Like I was smart. Okay. So you're going to have a sanity die. And anytime that you're asked to roll it, you roll that particular die, and if you get a 1 or a 2, it becomes 1 die type less. So it's a diminishing die system. If you have a wisdom or charisma, whichever is higher, if your score is 9 or below, you start with a D4. If it is a 10 to a 12, you get a D6 to start with. If it is a 13 to a 15, you get a D8 to start with. If it is 16 to 18, you get a D10. And if you have a 19 or higher, it is a D12. Everybody got that sorted out? Groovy. Okay. Then if you are ready, we'll get this party started. Find my picture. All right. Finally, the last stop before home. You had to dock at the Harbinger to refuel at Terminus Dusk before heading on towards the moon of Cadian. The looming sight of this thing was unnerving to be this close to. Its shadow did not merely block the light of the stars. You could feel it wrapped around you here, like a blanket of darkness that muffled the rest of existence. It seemed to almost shut out the voices of the others on board. Your cares, along with your worries, slipping away as if it would be just the two of you for eternity. It beckoned to you. And as quickly as this strangeness had taken hold, you were released. You found yourself rocketing away from the Harbinger, with the gray and black sphere of Cadian growing larger before you. Who do we see on this void ship heading home?
Zach would definitely be one of the people in this boy ship ready to come home from guardian duty.
What does he look like? What is he up to?
Well, he has standard, I would say, like armor to his the faction he's protecting, and then he's skinny. I would say about 5'10", 5'11". The side of his hair is shaved, but he has long hair to the side. Asian guy. You guys were able to hear me or no?
Yes, I heard you. Is there anyone else that is on board this void ship heading home?
Noelle is sitting around a corner where she can see everyone and is messing with one of the spheroids. Just something to preoccupy her time as things go on. She's got short, neon green hair, dark eyes. She's about average height, but very spindly and pale. You could easily spot that she was a voidborn from the mile away.
So a starter is also there, sitting in one of the bucket seats, a leg draped over the arm of it, disheveled, shirt untucked, synth leather jacket sort of crumpled around him as though it's been crammed into a garbage bag for the last couple of days. His hair's greasy and clung to his head in certain places. There's this unkempt look just completely about him, and a smell that may or may not be his. It's hard to tell at this point. His hands are scarred and fingers gnarled. You can tell he chews his nails, and crooked teeth from being hit in the face maybe 1 or 2 or 10 too many times. That permanent 5 o'clock shadow that just gives off the air of not caring, and he sort of has his head lolled backwards, but if you can see it, he has this sharpness to his eyes that are peering out from these baggy, dark, sunken pits as he watches everybody, as though he's taking stock and memorizing something about them. He has that look of someone who takes in details without meaning to. And perhaps that's why he is the way that he is because he observes so much and realizes that maybe at the end of the day, people aren't worth it. And so he just sits there and shifts uncomfortably, but not enough to change it, as though he realizes that discomfort is just part of life at this point.
Hakuro is there as well. He's got this armor on that he always seems to wear, this like iron-plated armor that covers everything, even his face and his head. At this point, like it might actually be connected to him. It's hard to say. You've like rarely ever seen him take it off. But he's just kind of like sitting in one of the chairs. He's got his feet kicked up on a console. He's probably been yelled at by the other people to not put his feet there many times, but he does it anyways. And he's kind of like shifting his hands in front of his face as this like small ball of blue Astra will continue to like warp and change shape, like change into a dagger and then like a miniature replica ship and then like an arc tool and then like all these different shapes. He's just kind of like fiddling with it idly, boredly even. It's just kind of like a nervous and bored habit that he has to like fiddle with this energy that he has as he goes. Just kind of like look around to the others. Like as if simultaneously trying to show off and also like not wanting to be noticed.
So Vivian is dozing at the moment. Just her head is leaned back on the seat. She has one foot propped up. Around it is a pack, some sort of backpack. Her arms are splayed on across the back. Her mouth is hanging open, and just this very very unflattering angle. And maybe a few of you who are particularly close would hear a soft snore coming every so often. But if those who are close enough will see that her eyes seem to be filled with tears. And across the sides of it are stained. Though she doesn't make a sound, she doesn't even move to show any sign of a nightmare. Anyone who would just normally look at her would think that she's sleeping, if not for just the tears coming from her eyes.
Suddenly, all of you are elsewhere. A sickly yellow light bathing everything. Before you, you see attack ships in assault formation amid a space station more advanced than anything you can recall. And yet, something is familiar about its angles and the presence that it commands. You find your hands on the controls of one of these attack ships, ready to fire your glittering sea beams at the dark shapes slowly taking over the Tannhauser Gate. All of you, if you would, please, roll your sanity die. And then let me know if you got a 1 or a 2.
I got a 4.
Okay. So you're handling yourself all right in the situation right now.
5.
You as well. Cool as a cucumber.
I also got a 4.
Okay. Same.
3 for myself.
Okay.
And 7 for me.
Perfect. All right. Everybody is good to go. If you would, please, each of you, kind of describe what you are doing in this situation. How are you reacting to finding yourself here abruptly?
Yeah, Zach would definitely unbuckle his seatbelt and get right next to the window, and he would do like a double look, like pilot, where are we? What's going on? And he would just be paying attention to the scenery, like confused.
Yeah, just to clarify, you are the only one in this fighter. This is a small craft, and you are the one that is flying.
Oh. Well,
this was not where you were just a moment ago, by the way.
Well, he would definitely be very confused, but he would put the ship on like autopilot and step out of the seat for a second and take like a wider glance at what's going on.
I imagine there's some sort of shift in the ship, and no matter how slight or even noticeable it is, Vivian would immediately, her eyes would open, she would wipe away the wetness from her eyes and just look around wildly, but not saying anything, just almost watching and waiting for something to happen.
Noelle is rather surprised to be in this scenario, but perhaps she slipped off into a dream. And she ducks down into position and tries to work with the ship and steer into place, attack anyone who attacks her, and stay out of danger.
So, contrary to his calm demeanor, which may or may not have been chemically aided as he was on this larger ship, a starter is not a big fan of space. He's not a big fan of little metal cubes in space that might then get blown up and him sucked out into the vacuum of death. So the haze of intoxication immediately like evaporates like a stinky sweat from him as he lurches forward, smacking the controls and causing a sort of nosedive of this small ship that he's now in control of. And he grips it like with this white knuckled tension, trying to process how all of a sudden he's here, but also at the same moment realizing that if he doesn't do something, he's going to careen into this large piece of metal, and well, that's that. So he does the only thing he's ever seen in the videos, and he yanks back real hard on this stick to try and bring the ship back to some horizon while making himself nauseous, not knowing what to focus on in space, and and does everything he can to not vomit, which then vomits all over the controls. And there's a lot of swearing in the cockpit this moment as he is looking for buttons that make sense and not finding any of them.
Hakuro will like jolt forward in the seat that he was sitting in. So he'd been like leaning back, relaxing. He'll suddenly like jump down forward, like leaning forward in the chair. His eyes will like dart around through the glass to try to see what's happening. The blue neon astra that he had been like forming with his hands will like jolt back into his hands. And they'll like glow with the blue energy and like streak up his arms, almost like veins over the armor. As he'll immediately kind of switch into danger mode. Begin trying to like reorient himself, curious as to like how something like this could even be possible, and trying to like figure out where he is and like what he needs to do to stay alive right now in this moment.
Did everybody go? I think we might be missing. No, everybody went.
Jeremy, in that immediate moment of panic and looking
Mhm.
around and trying to capture this reality, is there anything that stands out that at least a starter could latch onto, like, oh, I recognize this type of ship, or I recognize this, and this makes it a little more real, right? Because right now he's got to reel himself back in,
Mhm.
not unused to altered states of awareness, but he didn't choose this. So, is there
Exactly.
something that might be, the make of a ship, or something that he can lock onto that seems familiar all of a sudden?
These structures have a sense of familiarity to them, but it's like a distant familiarity. It's alien and bizarre, similar in some regards to the way the Harbinger is, but it's not the same. But you can see these other fighters zipping around, leaving these red kind of streams behind them as their jets burn this kind of magenta colored astra. And the ships themselves look very familiar. I don't know if you necessarily would be able to put a name to it in this moment, but they're definitely some kind of fighter assault vehicles. And for some reason, that you have a familiarity with that. So you are all cutting in and out of these structures, trying to figure out kind of what's going on, and you feel confident in your abilities at these controls. You feel like you know what you're doing. But the situation is foreign to you. You don't understand why you're here, or when or where here even is. You can watch this. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Sorry. Are there any sort of comms that
yes,
we can see?
Yep, absolutely. And basically anything that you have said or done, such as throw up, basically the rest of you have heard all of it.
So I think you would hear this very timid, hello? Hello?
Hello?
What the fuck is going on?
Good, there's more people.
Isn't it a dream? It feels like a dream.
Yeah, dreams don't feel this real.
I don't know. I've driven a few things in my lifetime. I don't know if you're even real.
Well, I know I'm real, that's for sure.
Just keep your head down and we'll figure this out, yeah?
Right.
Good question. Is there any way that I could input something into the computer in the ship to try to find like an area to like land, or at least like something to hide behind on?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of stuff here that would break line of sight. Would possibly give you a place to set down, at least momentarily. However, there is a battle that is raging on around you. There are other ships like yours that are engaged in intense firefights with some kind of strange, more organic shaped vessels, similar to kind of what you see kind of growing over parts of this man-made structure.
But it is very clear very quickly that it is these small ships versus whatever that is.
Yes, absolutely.
And like, you know, you've said that we kind of feel confident and that there's a familiarity to being in the controls for some strange reason.
Mm-hmm.
Is the intuition to continue this fight, to attack this organic thing, also feel familiar? Like, is that like a...
Yeah, I would say so. Not, again, like right now your mind is
Throwing up.
grasping. So it's really difficult to tell like what is a familiar situation and what is not. But you definitely feel your heart rate is up, and you feel like aggression in your system.
So I think almost mechanically rather than or intuitively, a starter is flying in a strafing line past one of these things as he is cursing and replying to the comments of who's there and are we real, and maybe even shooting at these things as he strafes past without realizing that that's what he's doing. And so there's that shocking moment of flyby and where the fuck, you know, without realizing, and so in that moment he kind of like jolts away from the controls for a moment and sits back and does anybody know what the fuck is going on?
No.
I have no clue.
Noelle is just completely into this, feeling right into that sense of hunting and trying to destroy these things. We're in a battle. Let's kill these things.
What are these things that we are
Oh
killing?
no. Bad. They look bad.
No one else bothered by the fact that we're not on the transport anymore?
I think I fell asleep.
Yeah, I've fallen asleep and woken up in a different hotel room, but never a different ship.
Huh. Which transport?
So
Is
I
it the
paused
same
and I
as
struggled to remember.
SS479?
Does that sound right? Sure. Yeah, so like I like rummaged in my pocket for like the little transponder that would gotten you on board, and I'm like, yeah, I guess.
Whoa. This is a vivid one.
So what's the plan here? Are we going to try to fight? Or are we going to try to get out of this ship? What's going on?
Well, I'm
all-
fighting.
You're all mental.
I have a mind just to leave. This is not our fight.
Voice of sanity.
I'm
fine with that.
I'm with you, Vivian. I say we get the hell out of here. No reason to die in a battle that's not ours. Find somewhere safe, we orient ourselves, figure out what's happened and what we want to do, and we'll go from there.
Do we hear beyond the people who are talking, who are obviously kind of confused and not shooting, do we hear anything from the people that are shooting and seem to be into this?
You do not currently. However, you realize that your comms are set up in such a way that you're on a localized channel, likely just the 6 of you or the 5 of you, and you switch channels probably to discuss things with the larger fleet.
Should we maybe talk to the others? See what's going on? They seem like they know what they're doing. Hopefully.
What they're doing is dogfighting in space against some sort of moldy space shit. This doesn't bother anyone?
Just as you say that, one of these meteor-like vessels careens very close to you, Kelvin, and you have to pull on the controls very hard to kind of bank and roll out of the way as this thing nearly collides with you. And it does collide with one of these metallic angled surfaces, and this plume of kind of darker yellow just expels everywhere, enveloping your ship. Similar situations rapidly afterwards happen to each of you. Either you fly too close to one of these structures that is being overrun or overtaken with this more organic matter, and a geyser of this same yellow comes up and engulfs you, or you are consumed by the astrobolt-like weapons of these vessels. And suddenly, you're all back on the transport, heading home to the moon of Cadian again.
I think because of the way that happens, a starter like lurches to his feet, his hands sort of like in that, don't trying to protect from an explosion you can't protect from, and he just, lurches to his feet, cold sweat, fuck, and like screams top of his lungs through this transport ship.
Some woman with a child not far from you kind of pulls the child away from you, kind of looks at you concerned.
I reach out to like the closest person to me. I don't even care who they are, and I just like give them like that "Are you real?" sort of poke.
Yeah, that woman who had just sheltered a child from you kind of recoils from your touch and gets up, and they actually leave the compartment you're in.
Yeah, Sack would.
Hakuro will. You go.
Sack would be like, when a plane is taking off and you get that feeling and you just hold on to something. He would do that right next to him. It would be probably two people. He accidentally grasps onto their thighs, and he's just like.
They both kind of look at you as if you've gone insane. As you're long from takeoff, you're mid-flight at this point, and all of a sudden you've jolted like this. One of them kind of slaps your hand away, looking at you like, "What's wrong with you?"
Sorry, I had a bad dream, and he would start like unbuckling his seatbelt fast to go to the bathroom, see what's going on.
And I think Hakuro would similarly kind of like have that like lurch forward moment as if to like brace. And like the neon blue in his hands will actually like lurch forward to his fingertips as to like ready himself to take impact. And actually cast like the bolster spell, like the zero fade Astra spell to like give himself a boost in the event that he needs to like prepare himself to like survive in space. Just as like the energy kind of lurches forward and he readies himself, there's that like moment of like waking up from a dream and like being back in a safe place again. Let's kind of like shake his head, looking around, and then like scratch at the helmet on his head as if it could like itch somewhere deep in his skull. That's like confused at the sight and experience of everything that's happened.
Vivian is curled up in a ball right now. She doesn't have that same jolt, almost as if has been expecting the death and has just succumbed to it, just readied for it. There is a kind of this light surrounding her, this neon green color, almost like a shell around her. And even after this shell kind of dissolves, it takes a very long time for Vivian to finally look up. And she would immediately start looking for, just making sure that she is where she is and that this isn't some sort of like weird hell.
That's difficult to say. I would imagine you've probably thought of Chrome City as a hell kind of all along. It's not exactly a nice place to live for the majority of the people who call it home. But judging by the reaction that you're seeing from everyone else, your guess is that either this is reality, or it's a very, very, very good approximation.
Noelle jerks awake and her spheroid goes flying out of her hands, scattering about like 15 feet away. And maybe some kid picks it up. Not really sure what it is. Sorry. Can I have that back, please?
He seems reluctant, but with the scolding of his father nearby, he will give it back to you, reluctantly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You die in a dream, you die in real life.
The kid kind of gives you a confused look and then kind of like turns away and walks back to his father.
I'm going to stand there for a minute looking at my spheroid, just kind of taking everything in before eventually taking a seat once again.
The rest of the ride home is an uneventful one, comparatively. You land at Chrome City, and something about Chrome City feels off. The people just seem strange to you. Just slightly this side of normal. Each of you, if you would, describe kind of the routine that you find yourself back in over the course of the next few days as your life goes on normally.
So I think Vivian would return to her employer, someone who has hired her as essentially some sort of bodyguard. But more so the kind that is meant to take a bullet than to shoot one. He has other bodyguards for that. Vivian is essentially a glorified meat shield. And she does this day in and day out, follow the movements of a paranoid aristocrat, essentially. Making sure that nothing comes in between, that no harm comes to him. And when she is not there, she is painting in this tiny, rundown apartment. She has nothing but a single bed and an easel propped up against the window so that she can look out among the city lights, the smog, the yelling. And she paints.
It's one of these nights where you are accompanying this aristocrat. You are in a hotel room that would take you probably half a year's pay to afford one night in. You're standing outside the door. The aristocrat has retired to the bedroom, so you're kind of in the living room type area of this hotel room, when suddenly there's a loud crash from the bedroom.
She would turn swiftly, her training taking more precedent than her emotions, and she knocks quickly but loudly. Sir? Are you okay?
You hear movement, shuffled very quickly, but no response.
I'm going to open the door if you do not respond. And her hand is already on the handle to the door.
As you reach out and touch the control pad that will open this door, the lights in this room flicker for a moment and then come back on, but there's still no reply.
Kind of given this new sense of panic, she is going to press in the emergency to open the door in the case of an emergency. And hopefully the door opens. If it does, she would just rush in.
Yeah, you override kind of with this special card that you've been given as the bodyguard, and the door opens, and as it does so, the lights go completely out. And then they come back on just a moment later, and as they do so, you see a dark shape, roughly human-sized, but like wispy or liquidy, all of a sudden like duck and disappear under the bed. And there's no sign of your client.
She would immediately go to try and turn on the lights while frantically looking for her employer.
You start looking about, moving, checking under the bed. Nothing's there. You go through into the closet. There's no one there. And then all of a sudden, you hear, "What the hell are you doing?" And as you look, your client is sitting up in bed, dressed in their night clothes, and the lights in the room are turned down low as if he were asleep. And you're standing in the middle of his room, and he's not pleased with you.
She would immediately look at him, eyes wide, and stand back up quickly and go back to assuming this position, standing up straight. My apologies, sir. I heard a loud bang and you didn't answer, and I came in because I thought there was something wrong, and then there was a shape, and then the lights turned off. I'm sorry.
I'm trying to sleep. Please, get out.
Yes, of course, sir. Apologies, sir. And she's going to leave very, very, very shaken.
You do so. You return home, you change, and you go to relax with your painting. This painting that you've been making of the rain-soaked neon streets of Chrome City. But as you sit down at your canvas, you realize that these are your brushstrokes, but you don't remember painting this image. This image of this blobulous black smoky, liquidy figure. It just dominates the center of this canvas, scribbled almost as if by a person who is losing their self.
Imagine that her eyes wide. With one finger, she would go up to the canvas and just, with her fingers, kind of outline this, whatever lines there are of this figure.
Even though you just came off of a 10, 11-hour shift, the paint on this canvas still seems to be wet.
So I think at that point, she would immediately, just upon feeling the wetness, she would burst back from her easel, and her breasts would be ragged as she begins looking everywhere in her apartment, which is very small. I think it's just one room and then a bathroom, so it doesn't take too long for her to look.
And when you open one of the cabinets, one of the doors in your place, you leave behind this handprint filled with paint. Though you only touch this painting with a single finger, you have paint all over both of your hands. And it's definitely the color, this black Icarus color of what was painted. And you're wearing all of this paint.
She would let out this short scream and rush to the shower, clothes on, everything on, and just turn hot water on to try and get this paint off of herself.
Excellent. If you would please roll me a sanity check.
Okay. Ooh, that's a 1.
Okay. What die type did you have?
It was a D8, right?
What is your charisma or wisdom?
My charisma is +4.
Okay, so you have an 18 or 19. So it started as a D10.
Oh.
So it is now a D8. Well,
okay.
Go ahead and re-roll it.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good. You were busy setting stuff up at the beginning, so.
That is still a 1. So.
Okay. So it is now.
Okay. It was meant to be.
Right. Indeed. Okay. Who's next?
So coming back and walking through the grime of the streets and the puddles, we see a starter walking down this row of businesses, and then he cuts up an alley. And this alley is full of garbage, and there's a dark shadow that leans against the wall that at first look gives you the idea that it might be one of those soulless constructs that some of the necros use, but it turns out to be various bags of garbage and refuse. And he opens a small door inside this alley that leads immediately to a stairwell. On the left there, the remnants of what might have been a postal service deal, if anyone had ever used it or bothered to send mail to this location. And he goes up these stairs. There's that acrid smell of old and disused and probably urine. And he gets up to an office that has a starter detective agency written above it in letters that have long since faded and peeled. And he looks around and moves what appears to be a plate that would have reinforced part of the door to the side, sticks his hand through and unlocks the door from the back side. Can't even afford to have his own locks repaired. He goes inside, and the vision you see is the same as him. It's disheveled and disorderly. There are things laying all about, clothes and food containers and such. And he drops his coat onto a wooden chair and goes into what might be a kitchen. and opens a cooler box and pulls out a container, something that he smells and grimaces from, and sets it into a sink. Reaches above and pulls down a small plastic bag that says something like Kelpos or something. It's some horrible kelp-based cereal, and he wipes out a bowl with his sleeve, grabs the cleanest spoon out of the sink, sets down at a desk that has folders and documents and drives and things that would make you think that at one point he cared about what he did, and maybe he was even good at it. He pours the kelpos into the bowl and starts to eat them dry before reaching into the desk drawer and pulling out a bottle of some likely alcoholic beverage, dumping it across these kelpos. And then, although in his own domain, again looks around, and he reaches to the interior pocket of his shirt and he pulls out what a passerby might think is one of the Lorium flasks, right? These data containing green liquids. This one, on closer look, seems to be powdered. It's a trend in the streets nowadays that they take these data vials, they dry them out and mix them with other chemicals, and it's called downloading. You're getting bits of information that were meant for a computer, that were meant to go into one of these what are they called? I'm so sorry. What do they call them in this? The display device, glancers.
Glancer.
Yep. So it's meant to go into a glancer, and he pours that in there, mixes it around, and leans back and starts to eat this mixture of disgusting. And there's no grimace. There's no this is life. And as he does, he wheels this old-timey wooden chair, those thick, heavy wooden chairs you see in the detective movies. You got like the railed backs. He sort of spins it around and if the camera pans with him, there's an expectation it's going to be a window, and it's not. It's a brick wall. And on this brick wall is a small glancer that is sort of stuck in repeat. And you see an image of a starter and this woman like speaking to each other, and as it pans back, it's very obviously like a wedding photograph. And then it blinks out and then replays the same thing as he sort of stares at that and eats his kelpo and alcohol mush before giving in either to the exhaustion or the combination of alcohol and things you're not supposed to imbibe into this. And he'll fall asleep in his chair. And that's a pretty constant thing we might see him occasionally out roughing up some hood in an alley because he was told to go look into something for some mediocre pay that allows him to rent this hole in the wall office. But that's kind of his existence.
And I think it's when you're roughing up one of these street thugs that at some point you grab this person you've been kind of chasing, and you kind of throw their back up against the wall of a building in some shit alley, and you turn them around, and as you do so, they look up at you, and tentacles of wire and metal just snake out of their mouth and grow to probably 2 to 3 feet long as they start to separate and wrap around your forearms and your back. And just about the time that you're kind of taken with this experience, you jerk awake in your chair, this bowl half empty and spilled into your lap. You reeking even more than you may have before. And you realize that there's a knock on your door. This kind of frantic, like,
damn it, just a minute. God. Shit. Fuck. And so he grabs maybe a less clean shirt and is trying to wipe himself free of kelpos. And then walking towards the door, realizing that maybe this is a client, looks around for something to rid him of this smell. and not seeing anything too great. Yeah, just a minute. He steps into the bathroom and grabs one of those blue rings that you would throw into the toilet, and like just lifts up his shirt and like kind of rubs it over himself, and then his hands and chucks it into the toilet and onto his pants, and then goes to the door and kind of cracks it open. What?
It's on the approach to the door that you kind of falter in your step for a moment. The silhouette that's kind of showing through this detective painted glass, part of the door is unmistakably your wife's.
So, like, his hand gets like halfway to the doorknob, and he can I help you?
You leave the door shut for the moment.
Mm-hmm.
The figure moves slightly and says, I need help. You're taken back to this is the exact moment when you first met your wife. This is how you first met.
So he like gulpingly swallows a breath of air and reaches for the doorknob and turns it the wrong way so it doesn't unlatch and tugs on it. You see him pull his hand away, sort of shaking. And then he turns and he pulls the door open and has that downcast look. So he's looking at feet as he slowly brings his eyes up.
You open the door, and as you do so, the light from this past memory, the way that the hallway outside of your office apartment used to look, I imagine it's almost a warmer glow. It fades, makes a shift to these darker, cooler colors that you're used to now. And the hallway outside your door is empty.
And then he'll like lean out, and he knows she's not going to be there, but he looks both ways, right?
There's some junkie 4 or 5 doors down, leaning against the wall, half asleep, half tripping.
Right.
No one else.
And a starter just kneels down and he touches this stain on the floor. And it's an old stain, probably 4 or 5 years at this point. And you would get the feeling that it's blood. And it's still dry. There's no wet from the blood. There's no wet from feet that would have been standing there. There's no. And he just closes the door and then falls sort of back against it. Now looking across the room, across this messed up desk towards that glancer.
Fantastic. Roll your sanity check for me, please, if you would.
I rolled a 3. So like on the verge of an honest mental collapse, right? Between the drugs, between whatever happened when we were coming home, and uses that term loosely. There's this grown man, this disheveled hard ass who just breaks down into tears. And like reaches back inside like that inner pocket for that same vial, and then kind of like pissed off just throws it across the room, lets it shatter against the wall.
Barely holding on to your mental facilities. Who's next?
We see it's raining outside on this planet. It's like a dark overcast. It's begun to downpour like fairly hard. And we see Hakuro moving from alley to alley. The water droplets like plinking lightly off of the armor that seems to be attached to him like skin. And he's like moving, eyes kind of darting back and forth, place to place, until he finds this like old warehouse-looking building. It's like super run down. It's probably like condemned and should be demolished, but it hasn't yet for some reason, though he knows why. And like walk up, kind of scan the approach of the building as he goes until he seems to find a certain spot that catches his fancy. And he'll like move, and he'll begin like jumping up like these pipes that kind of run down the back side of this warehouse building. Each time that he would land on a pipe, there's like a flash of blue astra that'll come from his foot, and it'll make no sound. This like eerie, silent image of like rain falling and plinking, and what should be like metal clangs ringing out with each step as he jumps from spot to spot. But nothing does happen. It's like this eerie silence until finally he makes it up to like a top window that seems to be open or left open or even smashed open, I think at this point, from some long ago struggle or whatever that's happened there. And he'll slowly climb his way through, and the Astra will like shift like up through his feet, and then out back towards his hands, and like up even into his eyes, and he'll like take a quick look around, as like he uses this Astra to like augment himself in his movements, and he'll begin like creaking slowly along this like top metal grating on the top level of this warehouse, until eventually he'll like come into like what would have been like the office building where they can oversee the production floor down below. The door is already open, and it's like off its hinges slightly, to the point where you couldn't even close it if you wanted to anymore. And the Astra will like go to his fingertips, and it'll like begin to like arc between his hands. This like electric blue neon Astra that'll like crackle like silent lightning, which will then like slowly like bring his hands out, stretching it before to like turn into a blade, this like long Odachi sword, and begin like stalking forward. And there's a person kind of shoveling through various stuff in this warehouse, throwing aside bins, just knocking metal boxes down to the ground, spilling them open, like looking through them. And this man hasn't noticed Hakuro yet. And I'll take another couple step forward, and like bring the blade out and hold it towards this person's back. Sorry, your time's up. I've had enough. The man will like turn around, surprised. And before he can even say anything, there's like this as the astral blade will like pierce through this person's chest, just like impaling him through it, sending this like blue crackle across this person's body, like he's being like shocked and stabbed at the same time. For like wrench it to the side to ensure like maximum damage and like rip it out of his body, sending like a spray of blood down across the side of the wall. The box that this man was holding will like clatter down to the ground, spilling out all these like lorium vials and glint that were stashed in there. Clearly some sort of like secret hiding spot that whoever this person belongs to uses to hide stolen goods. And as the blood will like spray across the wall and the man will like fall down, the blue astral blade will like crackle and go back into his hands, where his astral power usually sits. And I'll kind of take a quick look around, reach down, scoop some of the vials into this box, and close it, and then begin to walk out of the office. His contract fulfilled, at least step one.
And it's as you're scooping these contents kind of into your satchel or your pocket or whatever bag that you use to kind of carry these, you can feel something shift in the air. Something changes in the room that you're in. And suddenly you notice that the light that's kind of shining from behind you is interrupted by a shadow. And there's this strange, like, snapping noise that is happening.
Yeah, immediately there's like the crackle of energy will like arc between his hands again as I like immediately turn and look. Like his eyes kind of taking a second to adjust and like the spotlight that's now like beaming right through the glass in his helmet, trying to see what's obstructing this view. He was like positive, more than positive that he hadn't been followed, that nobody had like saw him enter here. And he's like astounded that somebody could have found him in the act.
And surprising more still, maybe, is the fact that it's this man you just stabbed. Or it was. Where you have stabbed him in the back, this wound has splayed itself open. And his ribs, you guess, from the look of it, have twisted around and grown into spider-like legs, supporting his limp corpse between them like the anthrax of an insect. His head is hanging backwards, his mouth agape. And suddenly, from his eyes and his mouth, the pipes and the cables that you were climbing upon, dancing with blue electric astra, begin climbing out of his mouth and snaking around towards you. They start to grab a hold of your wrists and your legs. And one of them heads straight for your face. Suddenly, you find yourself back on the outside of the building before you have even entered the window. If you would, please roll your sanity check.
Absolutely. And fittingly so, I rolled a 1.
All right. And what die type did you have?
So I was at a D10, so that'll drop me down
Okay.
to a D8.
Yeah, that's correct. Awesome. Okay. Next.
Noelle returns to the more shadier areas of town, kind of passing a hello to different criminal contacts, as if to say, hey, I'm in town. If you got any business, hit me up. Otherwise, I'll probably just hang around my place waiting for my next job. Something that might take me out of this bucket again. And I head back to the hole in the wall that I consider my room. It's not a ton of stuff, random salvaged posters and an old-fashioned video game set where you fly a spaceship and kill aliens and stuff, which is why she was totally on board with that one vision being a dream. And she's just playing with it, passing the time, hoping to get a call.
And finally, the call comes through as you've been waiting.
Hello?
You answer the phone, and at first there's complete silence. Just about the time that you're about to hang up, a voice on the other end of the line says, "Have you seen it?"
Seen what?
The the truth.
Is this a prank call from the religious order? I told Jehovah's Witness to leave me alone.
Would you like to know the truth about what you've seen?
Sure.
The voice gives you an address and then hangs up.
Huh. Oh, it's better than what I'm doing right now. Why not? I scribble down the address and I start heading towards it.
When you hail the taxi, that the hover car kind of takes you across the city, again through this driving rain, this constant rain. You realize that you're being dropped off in the outage district, a place where the people who are even worse off than you live. Many of them without any Astra at all. Many without even electricity. And the place where it has dropped you off looks like at one time that it was some kind of church, some kind of cathedral.
Figures. Religion always has the truth. I go in up to the door and see if I can get in.
As you're approaching the door, you feel that someone is watching you. You feel eyes on you.
I look around.
As you do so, you notice these grotesque decorative carvings, these gargoyle type statues that are 30 feet off the ground, give or take, kind of at the corners of the buildings. One of them just moved. Its head shifted from looking directly at you back into a more straight position that matches the rest on the building.
I stare at it, waiting for it to move again.
And it doesn't.
I start to get cold feet. And I decide to open the door.
Yep. The door in front of you opens, and there's no one standing there.
What does it look like inside?
There are wires and cables run everywhere here, but they are not original to this building. They've been bracketed into the corners of the ceiling and the walls. And they're probably the size of a human thigh bundled together, running on both sides of the ceiling back towards a open door near the back of this hallway that stands open with a soft blue light coming from it.
Noelle just knows in her gut that she really shouldn't walk into this place, but she can't help but be a little curious.
You take a step through the threshold and you fall. As you're falling towards the floor, you realize it looks like it's liquid. And just as your face would be splashing into this liquid, you find yourself floating in space, in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by stars and the bright, pulled and muted colors of nebula, and nothing else anywhere near you.
I quickly put on my rebreather, and I just keep straining for anything, something, anything that I
As
could
you're
work with.
as you're begging and pleading for something, you see a shape coming towards you. It's distant, but it's traveling fast. It looks maybe like a ship. It's dark at this point. It starts to grow larger as it gets closer and closer to you, and you can tell it is a ship just by the shape of it. But then something about its shape changes. Pieces, at first, you think it's pieces of the ship like breaking away, but then you realize that, in fact, it's formed these long tentacle-like wires and cables, almost like a squid or an octopus, flailing out away from the center part of this mass. And as it starts to get larger and larger, you notice that these tentacles are reaching up and plucking these stars from the sky. Like every star that one of these tentacles touches blinks out and just disappears. And finally, it surrounds you entirely in darkness and closes in on you. And that's when you wake up on the floor of your shithole of an apartment. If you go ahead.
I stare at the ceiling, trying to comprehend what I just saw. But sanity?
Yes, please.
Oh, sorry, rolled off. 5.
Okay. So somehow, through all of this, you have managed to maintain your grip on your mental facilities. All right. I think that leaves just one.
Yeah, so as he gets off the boy ship, Zach will be reaching into his pack and pulling up like a small flask. And he will be drinking that as he's trying to wave down like a taxi so that way he can get to his apartment complex. And he will get in, tell the guy where to go, and he would just be, taking a few sips in the back of the taxi, just trying to relax a little after what just happened.
The driver of the taxi makes idle chit-chat with you as you kind of numb a little bit of your pain or your confusion. And where is he taking you?
Probably taking me to this really shitty rundown part of town, and I would imagine he probably dropped me like halfway there because he doesn't want to go through it. So after he gets off, he would give him his tip, and he would start going down this long like alley where you can barely even see. Like we would pick up like a small rock, and you would just see him close his fist and then open his hand, and his hand would be glowing. He would toss it like halfway across the alley just so you can see through it, making his way down to his apartment complex. And you can see the complex in front of you. It's really big, but it's really shitty. It's like rusted metal. Some of like the side, like you can see into the building.
You're making your way down this kind of long and narrow, rain-soaked alleyway, and you toss this rock that you've charged with Astra down so you can see. And as you're kind of walking towards it, this is probably the second or third time that you've done this down this alley. You're closing with this rock that you've enchanted, and the light on it begins to dim. And then you realize that no, the light on the object, the rock itself, didn't dim. It's actually the light that it's casting onto the surrounding sides of the buildings and objects in this alleyway that has actually dimmed. And as they dimmed, it's almost like the walls and the objects in this alleyway actually shifted closer, almost like a predator, just kind of slinking forward, just barely perceptible.
I think he would start just freaking out a little, especially after what happened in the ship, just thinking that maybe somebody is like, behind him or somebody's watching him, like he feels like he's being watched. So he would keep his hand like on the gun, not on the trigger, and he would start walking faster. He wouldn't even bother trying to pick up the rock.
You begin to walk faster forward, and you realize that just on the distance alone, you've been in this alley before, just on the distance alone that you have left to go down this alley, that you must have just entered it. That you're at the beginning of this alley. You turn around to see if that's actually true, and there's a wall inches in front of your face.
He would definitely touch the wall just to make sure it's real. Like what the fuck is going on here? He would probably reach back into his pack and just take the last swig of his flask, test it down, and he's gonna try to like kneel down for a second just to get some speed and just dart off the other way, like make it to the other side. Like he's just confused, like he don't understand what's going on.
Sorry for the dogs barking here. You turn and run, and that's when you slam into another wall that is maybe 10 feet from the first wall.
Okay, so it's like all the walls are just closing in.
Yeah, and as you kind of turn and look around, you realize that you are surrounded on all sides, top, bottom, and all four directions, by walls that look identical to one another. And they start to shrink towards you, closing in foot by foot.
I think he would try to maybe see if he can climb a wall or find something to stand on, even step on his backpack if he has to. But at this point, he would probably be freaking out. Like he's claustrophobic. He doesn't like this.
Just about the time that these walls have closed in to be enough that you have to bend over, they're maybe 4 foot on a side at this point. All of a sudden, you find yourself in the back seat of that taxi, still drinking this bottle. And the taxi driver is kind of looking expectantly in the rearview mirror. So, where are you going?
And he would be like, "Give me a second." He would open the window and toss the bottle out. Just 3 blocks down.
All right. Roll me that sanity check, please.
I also got a 1.
And what was it before? What kind of die?
D8.
Okay. So it is now a D6. And at the end of this is where we're going to take our break. So 5 to 10 minutes, smoke them if you got them, go to the bathroom, refill your drinks, kiss your spouse, etc., etc. Thank you very much. If you were watching live this evening, as well as if you were watching in the future at some point, hang out. We'll be right back. Cool. I am back.
Hey. I just watched the movie Velvet Buzzsaw. I don't know if...
I have heard of it, but I haven't watched it yet.
I have to say, you knowing, well, not knowing it, you made a really, really big, like correlation with what happened in Velvet Buzzsaw to what happened to my character, and that really freaked me out. So.
Oh, well, then good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I watched Sphere and Event Horizon to prepare for this game. So. Yeah. As well as Love, Death, and Robots. I don't know if anybody has seen those yet, but those are phenomenal.
They're so good.
Yeah. And like I was talking with my wife about it after we watched them. I was like, there's not a single one of them that I would have said is bad. It's just because there's like a handful of them that are really, really good. It makes the rest of them kind of meh. Even though they probably would have been fantastic standalone things.
Yeah. Found the same thing with like Black Mirror, right? Like, there's just some of them that are just so amazing that it makes the other ones just like, this is just average? What?
So I jumped in on a tail end, but I assume we're talking about robots, sex, and whatever on Netflix.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some of them are great. Some of them are okay.
Yeah. We started with the fourth one because it's the one about the mechs, and that's the one that everybody was talking about.
The farmer one?
Yeah. So we went and watched that one first, and I was like, oh, man, that was way better than I thought it was going to be. So then we started at the beginning and started watching our way through them. And I think the first one is probably the best one out of all of them.
That first one is amazing. Like,
so good.
Everything about it. Like you watched it and you go, I'd play that.
Oh, yeah. There were several of the settings that they kind of explored with the different vignettes that I was like, yeah. I can run a game like that.
Yeah. I now want to do like a feudal China steampunk game. Yeah.
Yep.
I loved that one. That one was just the setting is so cool.
Yeah, there was a lot of really badass stuff there. It was really, really cool.
The one that surprised me was the yogurt one. Like, I was like, this is going to be completely stupid. But then I found myself enjoying it the entire time.
Yep. Cool. It looks like we might have everybody back. So if you all are agree, Jesus. If you all are okay, then we can dive back into it. All right. So things continue this way for each of you for several days. I would say you have at least another, maybe two other experiences like the one that we've just witnessed. But throughout it all, you start to hear a voice, a whispered voice. Seems to be calling to you. As the days go on, it becomes a constant droning call, no more perceptible to you than your own heartbeat. It is impossibly faint, too quiet to hear what it is actually saying, yet you feel something drawing you toward this voice, very similar to the feeling that you experienced back on the Harbinger, this enveloping feeling. What does each of you do about this?
So I think when
Hakuro,
oh, go ahead, please.
there you go. Okay. So I think Hakuro is like, he's not the most academic of Mansers. In fact, quite the opposite. But he's heard stories still of people using Astra that can like connect people's minds. They can like link their mind to yours, and they can like speak to you, and you can speak to them. And they can like see through your eyes and so on. And he keeps like imagining that this is like has to be what happens, and he knows that normally like both people have to like allow this connection to form, and he has not done so. So it's like jarring to him how this could happen. So he'll keep trying to like reach out with Astra to like talk back to this voice as if it's this telepathic link. Um, as in that sort of astral use. And the more that he goes on, the more that it starts to become apparent. Like that's not what's happening because he can't speak back to this thing. Like he didn't allow it to happen, and just nothing seems to add up. So he'll kind of keep feeling that like pull of like maybe this isn't what I think it is, and then eventually like curiosity turns to like disruption, where you like can't stop thinking about it like every moment. It's just like you need that sound to stop. You need it to go back to normal, and it won't. And it kind of just slowly keeps building to the point where I think he like stops working the jobs that he has. That he'll like tell whoever contracted him that he has a medical issue that needs to be seen, that he's like unable to carry out his duties, and that he'll have to like resign from them for the moment. And he'll just like spend almost like this like meditative sort of zen, using that Astra connection, almost like trying to connect with himself in a way to try to like understand what this voice is. Just like fixating solely on this repetitive pattern that's like invaded his own mind, trying to like determine what could possibly have caused this and what he can do to stop it.
And it's through this kind of meditation, this connection with kind of the astral network, if you will, that you feel physically drawn to a singular location. You feel yourself kind of being coaxed and pushed by this whispering voice to go there.
Yeah, I imagine it's this similar to how he's usually the one using the Astra to like aid his own limbs to make him faster, quieter, stronger, and so on, as he needs to, using that blue electric energy to fuel himself. Instead, it's the opposite, where instead of him moving his arms and telling the Astra to help him, the Astra seems to be tugging him in this direction instead of using it to drive himself forward. It's like a reversal of power between him and the energy, where the energy seems to be calling the shots. And it'll like pull at his legs until they walk in the right direction. And eventually will just give in to this strange pull that his own body seems to exert on his mind against his will, instead of trying to deny it or resist it, just allowing it to synchronize in with him as well, until he and this pull, this fixation in his mind and now his body are one and the same, and he'll just give in to the pull and follow it.
All right. Anyone else?
So for for a starter, I think trying to get the image of his wife out of his head, trying to get this voice, this whatever to stop. He's poured himself as much as he can into his work, and one of these days, afternoons, evenings, he finds himself again in an alley, having cornered what he thought was a singular individual that he had been tailing. He found himself surrounded by 4 or 5 large, brutish people who have since used him to redecorate the sidewalk. And he's laying there, left eye almost swollen closed, blood pouring out. And he, through that swollen eye, looks up, and there's a company in Chrome City called Vivane, and it's like a plasma donation thing but it's for people who can channel Astra, right? You go there, you donate some of your blood, and they pay you for it, right? It's a huge thing for a lot of druggies and people who have found themselves addicted to other Astra type things. But through the swollenness of his eye, he sees the Vive thing and it begins to blur, and he remembers one name that was called out in this episode of being inside this fighter, and it was Vivian. And that clicks, seeing the Vivane, and it just sort of blends to, and so he drags himself up and spends the next couple of days paying who he has to, chasing who he has to, beating the shit out of who he has to eventually get a hold of the manifest for that transport ship. And he tears through it looking for anyone who could be a Vivian or something close, because maybe he misheard it. So the first two are just completely wrong. It's the wrong people, it's the wrong time. And eventually he finds this person that maybe this is the right Vivian. And so in that scene, we would see a starter sitting across the street on a bench, this leather jacket now tore from having his ass whipped in an alley, and a baseball style cap sort of pulled down over his greasy hair as he's looking across the street up to this window where there is this person painting. And he's waiting for that person to come outside, because he doesn't know what's in the building or who they are or why he's here. But he does know that getting to this building, that voice has backed off a little bit. It's not, the noise is still there, but it's not as incessant. It's not as nagging. For the moment, it's turned to a dull hum, and that's something he couldn't even accomplish with alcohol or drugs. So something's either very right or very wrong about this, and he's not sure how it's going to go. So sitting in his lap underneath a folded piece of torn sweater or something he found in an alley, he has his pulsar sitting in his lap, his finger on the trigger, not knowing that when this person comes downstairs, does he need to talk to her, does he need to shoot her?
You likewise, as the voice was the most intense, it was drawing you further into the city somewhere. But instead, you have come here following the lead, the way that you used to do things. And as you sit here and wait for something, anything to explain what's been happening, Vivian, you're painting. And this voice has been likewise echoing inside of your skull for days on end now, just refusing to go away. Imperceptible, but ever present. There's this sudden spike in this voice, and something about it causes you to look out your window, but not out across the cityscape the way that you normally do, but down just outside of your building. And there's a strange individual, which is not uncommon, but this person has been there for probably hours at this point. And I think at one point, you probably catch this individual looking up at you.
So, over the past however long it has been, days, a week, Vivian's outer demeanor has begun to change. At first, she would go out and she would just look a little more tired, a little more jumpy, a little bit less all there and attentive than what she usually was. But she was always passable as just having an off day. But that slowly began to change as more of these things happened. She would always come to work. Her hair was always wet. And at her apartment was a completely different story. There are canvases broken apart, some of them half burned, littered just across the floors. The bed has moved. The mattress has been shoved into the shower. And it is soaking wet. And Vivian, as she stands there painting, she cannot stop painting one thing: that figure. Every time she looks at it and she wants to paint something else, flowers, trees, cityscapes, buildings, she starts drawing the outline, angular even. She makes a point of making these angular straight lines on the canvas. But when she looks away for even a moment, or her focus is drawn away, she looks back and all she sees is that figure. And it has morphed over the times that she's drawn it. At first it was just some sort of amorphous blob, a silhouette maybe. But now it has eyes, a face. And it's getting closer. In all of her pictures, it gets closer and closer and larger and larger. And it is at that point where she notices this figure looking up at her from outside, that she looks back at her painting and she just sees the face of this thing. That's all that is taken up the whole entire canvas, is just this face. And she immediately rushes to the kitchen, takes a small knife and cuts out the face. And she rolls it up and she puts it in her pocket. And she's gonna go downstairs. And she goes out and she's going to approach Steve, what was your character's name again?
Sorry. So his name's Kelvin Astarter.
So she would approach him. You see her just coming, right? And you see just this crazy woman. Her hair is wet, but it's matted. And she has this black paint just all over her body in these streaks. Are you doing this to me? Is it you? And you can see she's clutching this piece of canvas in her hand as she's just looking at you wide-eyed.
So, for whatever reason, the sounds of the city, the panic in his brain, this voice, this driving sound, when you start to speak to him, the voice he hears is his wife's. And all he hears is her say, "Are you doing this to me?" And there's this flashback of holding her as she's dying in his arms, And when he goes to extend this hand that he knows has this gun in it, he knows he can reach you. He can put this to your forehead. He can pull the trigger and it's all over. Instead, he extends his hand and this leather jacket slides up on the front part of his forearm. You see the exact face that you've been drawn. And underneath it is a birth date and a burial date. And as he shoots his hand out instinctively to pull that trigger, instead he snatches the canvas out of your hand. And with tears in his eyes, these bloodshot, drunken eyes, he unfolds this or unrolls this canvas. He looks back at you. Fuck you.
Vivian does not hold your gaze. She immediately, at first she comes across this aggressive, but as soon as you show any kind of aggression back towards her, she cowers. And she averts her gaze. Can't stop seeing that face.
Me either. Every time I've closed my eyes for 7 years. You asked me a few days ago if there was anyone out there. Well, I'm here. What did you want?
She kind of looks at you, confused for a moment. Her eyes just are this manic, looking at you, trying to find some sort of familiarity, and then it hits her and her eyes widen. You were on those ships. Your voice. Those ships. Those ships.
Voice comes again to both of you, whispering loudly in your mind simultaneously.
Vivian would put her hands to her head and just crouch down to the ground.
A starter kneels down and he reaches over, and what most people would pull back from as this repugnant hand, bit fingernails and dirt, blood that's his and other people's. He pulls your hands away from your head. He brushes your hair back out of your face. Can you hear it?
She looks up at you. Her eyes are also bloodshot and tear-filled, and she just nods.
It's a building, a place. Let's go find who's doing this and end it.
We have to go. We have to go meet him. Okay. And she looks at you, and for a minute, you just see this sense of clarity again. Someone is taking charge. There is an explanation. Like, to her, there is an explanation, and then she takes a deep breath. Yes, let's go.
So he kind of pulls you up with him as he rises. Not mean. There's definitely a gentleness to this. And then I think, Jeremy, as they start to walk down the street, a starter drops that canvas and it unfurls and sinks into a puddle. And we see the face that maybe this is a starter's wife. It matches a tattoo on his arm. But there's something devilish about the look in the eyes, and that face, as the paint begins to run, but it's not completely set on the canvas, turns into this crooked smile as the two of them walk down the street.
Fantastic. So that leaves, I think, two of you. How do you handle this incessant whispering voice?
Noelle has been extremely restless, to say the least. She's no painter like Vivian is, but she has been doing a lot of chicken scratch, seeing what she sees, and key words, key feelings, like consuming, eternal blackness, nothing, hopelessness, apocalypse, astral projection. And she's just been researching and researching on whatever she can. And she's like, have you been hearing weird stuff lately? Have you been having weird dreams, seeing weird stuff? And it just keeps getting louder and louder, and she's not really finding answers except the big one that's been echoing loudly in her head. And at one point, she just completely gives up and starts walking on foot to see where this goes.
This is a trek that takes hours to make on foot, but driven and half insane, you make this long journey, and you're almost reaching it before you even realized how long that it's taken you to get there. Kept company, if you will, if you want to call it that, by this voice that is growing ever louder. What about Zach?
Zach will be in the office in his crappy apartment, and you will see all these papers like on his table, and in all of them he wrote like everything that happened since he was on that ship, like the interactions that he had, the vision, what happened in the long hallway before he got to the apartment, trying to figure something out, what the hell happened, trying to make some sense out of it. If you look into his face, you can tell he barely slept in the past few days. And the nagging voice has gotten to the point that he's irritated, and all he can think in his mind is like, I need to find out what happened, who did this, and the only thing that makes sense to him is to go back to where it happened to try to make sense of it before he goes insane.
And it's as you're making your way to this place where it all happened that you find yourself in one of the myriad of intersections in the city of Chrome City. This place that is frequently trafficked by people who could care less about what is going on around them. For all of the people that are here, you might as well be alone. However, when you've reached this place, you've realized that this wasn't on the path to where you were going, but somehow you have ended up here anyways. Your feet have carried you to a different place. And it's at this point when you look up and you see 4 individuals that you know for a fact were on board that ship with you whenever you came home. The 5 of you are now standing from different points of direction that you have arrived at this same intersection. This rain-soaked street with neon lights bathing everything around you in a rainbow of colors. The 5 of you now stand kind of looking at one another. What do you want to do?
So I think not knowing who these other individuals are, but having Vivian with him, a starter steps in front of her slightly, like putting himself between her, especially between her and the dude over there wearing freaking armor with a sword, right? Like that's a little uncalled for nowadays, isn't it? But he steps himself in between, half of her, like half shielding her. And for anybody who has any sort of combat training, it is very obvious that he has a gun that's just inside of his coat, and you can see that muscle twitch of someone who maybe he's too apt to pull it out. Maybe that's too common of a response for him, as you can see that sort of muscle twitch that his arm is fighting that desire to reach in there and solve things the way he normally solves them. And he just stares from one to the other, to the other, to the other. And you can see that look in his face, that somewhere between pleading and demanding an answer.
I think Hakuro would sort of see that, because he's very, very battle trained as well. I think he would see that kind of twitch in your finger, like imperceptible to most people, that gunman's twitch of like, if something goes down, I'm ready to use that. And he'll like sort of like wave his hand like out, and the astral blade will like vanish entirely from his hand. He'll just kind of like put them up in like a hands up, don't shoot sort of way. Say, look. No need for violence. Must confess that I'm confused. Something's pulled me here, as if against my will. Called me to this place, and now I see you people, though I don't know your names. I know you were there, in that same place. Why? Like, ask as if you know.
I was hoping one of you would know. This has been bothering me for days. Like a migraine that just won't go away. So much for dreams, huh? I'm Noel.
Yeah, Zack would slowly approach, and he would be wearing this trench coat, and he would just like, as he's going, he would put it like on the side of the wall so you can see like his rifle and everything. And he would slowly walk forward, and he would be like, I don't know about you guys. I really don't know what the fuck is going on, but you guys all seem familiar. And I just want to know what's going on. I want this to stop. That's all I want.
You can see that Vivian is very curled up into herself, arms crossed, as she kind of peers, almost like a young child, around. Have you guys seen the figure? Have you seen him? Them? It?
I saw something. Don't really know what it is, but it feels like it's coming closer, getting bigger and stronger, consuming everything in its path. I don't know. That's the vibe I've been getting.
Vivian, like, nods very intensely, as if, and almost smiles. Yes, it's getting closer.
The whisper returns. All of you hearing it more intensely now, louder and clearer. You can almost actually make out words now. But it's something that you'd have to concentrate and focus on if you wanted to try to understand what it was saying. Anyone who wishes to do so can make a wisdom saving throw.
That one.
So Hakuro will like his eyes will like close from behind like the glass shield over the helmet. And like the flash of Astra will like rush from his hands like up to his like ears and then like into his brain. I'm gonna real quick use the bolster spell. It's a 0 fade Astra spell to give myself a bonus dice to the roll, if you'll allow that. And assuming that that's okay, that will put me at
sorry, I was giving you. Okay, 19. All right. So we've got a 1, a 12, a 19,
A 9.
a 9. Who am I missing? Steve, what'd you get?
Did roll it to if you wanted to understand it?
Yeah, if you don't.
Yep.
Okay.
Nope.
No worries at all. Okay. So the only one who figures anything out is going to be you, Hakuro. The rest of you that did roll, I need you to roll a d10 for me, please. We are rolling on the madness effects.
I did a 7.
Jose, you got a 7. Okay, so Zach finds it impossible to concentrate. You will critically fail all d20 rolls on a result of 1 or a 2 from now on until you complete a rest.
I rolled the 6.
6. All right, so Noelle has become nauseated. You are poisoned for 1d4 minutes.
Should I roll the 1d4 or you?
Go for it.
4 minutes.
All right.
Got a 2.
Megan got a 2. All right, so this is Vivian. Vivian, a shadow persists in your peripheral vision. You have disadvantage on perception checks until you complete a rest.
That very much makes sense.
Fits very well.
Yeah.
Okay. So while the three of you are kind of overcome from trying to reach out and connect with whatever this entity is, and it somewhat fractures your mind, at least temporarily, Hakuro, you reach out, and it's probably your connection with Astra. This, as you said, this constant connection to this power that you can barely understand and explain. You hear the words, "From the stars, which are right, I am here. Through a dark reflection, you will see my form clear." All of you, regardless of if you rolled or not, or if you're dealing with these side effects, you feel yourselves pulled, not simply drawn anymore, but pulled forwards towards the center of this intersection, where you find a puddle reflecting the neon of the city above. When you look down into this puddle, this simple gathering of rainwater, You notice that none of you are reflected in its surface.
I think Zach would like kneel down and touch it.
You do so. You reach down and disturb its surface, and it ripples. And as it does so, the neon lines that are kind of reflected there ripple more than the water reacting to your finger. They then begin to elongate and become these tentacle, cable-like shapes that begin to reach out of this puddle as if it were a hole in the ground.
I shoot the puddle.
You pull your gun and you fire a shot. Water splashes everywhere. You can hear the astrobolt that is flung from this gun ricochet off of the concrete and smash into a nearby sign. And still, these tentacle-like things reach for each one of you. They wrap around you and pull you forward into the puddle.
So, as this is happening, you see this snake-like creature slide out of the collar of a starter. It's obviously mechanical once it gets a little bit of light onto itself. It springs these wiry wings from his back and flutters above his shoulder before it starts to glow this iridescent neon pink, and then launches this astrobolt at these tentacles as one of my spheroids is attacking. And as I get pulled towards the puddle, I imagine that one of these tentacles branches out in this sort of sickly tendril, wraps itself around like the neck of this spheroid and chokes it as it drags it into the puddle with me.
As each of you disappear from this intersection, we see the walking traffic of this city continue as if nothing ever happened. As if 5 people didn't just get sucked into a puddle in the middle of the street. Each of you, if you would please, roll your sanity die again. Okay. Akuro is good. Ooh, very close, but Noelle is good. Also very close, but Zach is good. Varian, you're holding strong, surprisingly.
Surprising.
Yeah, that's a good point. At any point, if you'd like, you're welcome to take a drop in your die. Feel free.
Yeah, I think that as you know, we see this puddle, right? And we can see the reflection of people passing by, even though we couldn't see the characters' reflections earlier. And when that camera pans out to sort of see life in Chrome City, as dirty as it is, but at least it's life. At least it makes sense temporarily as these people go about their business. I think we see a starter's hand sort of shoot back up out of the puddle momentarily before it is just re-tentacled and just like slammed back down. And yeah, I'll reduce myself from a D8 to a D6 because this makes no damn sense whatsoever.
Perfectly fine with me. All right. All of you are lost for a time. It's difficult to tell how long might have passed. But eventually you find yourself thrown to the floor. Not violently. Spilled is probably a better term. You find yourself spilled out onto the floor of a large, cavernous space. And you are covered in this glowing, viscous, aqua-colored liquid. And it's all around you, having spilled out of this tube behind you. All of these cables and wires that have been attached to you disconnect with a kind of noise and come off of you. And looking down, you realize you are completely naked. You have nothing with you, no possessions of any kind. And you realize you don't even have hair. You are a blank canvas. Looking up, you see this row of these enormous machines that have these chutes on the front. And each of these has spilled out another individual. The 5 of you have been spilled onto the floor of this enormous space.
I think as Hakuro falls and is about to like hit the ground as he spills from this spot, he would like instinctively try to do the same thing that he always does, which is to like block his fall with the Astra, like pat it with the blue energy. As his instinct tries to do that, would it happen or no?
Yes, it's a delayed kind of response, but the Astra does answer your call.
And like hit the ground with like a thud, and then just like immediately like stand up and like look down at himself and then at the others and just kind of like begin like shaking his head. His eyes are like bug open wide. What the fuck? And his like breathing will start to accelerate. He'll start to like near hyperventilate as this like sudden system shock is like so much that it's like impossible to process. Like, what do you even do with?
Pretty sure as this happened and he wakes up and he sees all of this, he would just automatically start puking his guts out, like just disoriented, not sure what's going on, not sure if this is even real.
Noelle reaches out to Hakaru and is like, "Come on, man, it'll be okay. This is freaky as hell, but we're gonna figure something out. We're real. We can see each other. We can try and figure out something from there. Maybe find some clothes along the way." And she kind of covers herself up.
Vivian, just as she is, as she kind of gets up after being spat out, essentially, of this tube, she just begins to just wander around aimlessly, at first not really acknowledging anyone, as she just kind of looks and she traces this tube that she had just come out of.
As you're walking about and reaching out and touching this strange machine, this is almost like the first time that you've felt something like this. Even the floor beneath your bare feet feels strange, almost foreign. Like it's the first time that you've ever put your feet on something like this.
Vivian would slowly take a hand from this machine. Her eyes are just wide, just totally transfixed on her hand. She kind of holds it and looks at it, flipping it again and again. And she slowly, like, goes to touch her face and kind of caresses it. And then goes back to touching this machine.
So I think while everyone else is discovering themselves or this location, we see the one time that, you know, a starter being clean, but he's like knelt in the floor, sort of hunched over himself, and there's a rapidness to his breath. And as the camera sort of spins around to see what he's looking at, we can see blood and torn skin on his right forearm where the tattoo of his wife should be, and he's spent the last few seconds digging at his arm, attempting to peel back this flesh to figure out where her picture is supposed to be. And so he has torn into his own forearm with these fingernails that he's not akin to having, and has ripped open his arm looking for this tattoo. And he's sort of still there plucking at pieces of skin and pulling at it and sobbing and looking without meaning towards each of you before he looks back to his arm.
Noelle is at a loss for words as she sees Kelvin ripping himself open. Trying to comfort the others, and just seeing this is just getting to be a little too much for her go-to attitude. Figure something out. Just gotta figure something out. We're not in the void of space. There's a place here. We can figure something out. It's fine. Figure something out. Is any way out? The people. She's just thinking, trying to think, reaching for anything.
Each of you, if you would, just roll your sanity die again.
8.
8. Okay. 2, still going strong.
I got a 3, but I think after everything we've seen, and especially him seeing this guy digging into his arm, I'm gonna take a plunge on that one.
Take the hit. Okay.
Yeah, I'll go down to a D4.
Ooh. Right.
And as appropriate, I actually rolled a 1, so I also will drop to a D4.
Okay.
Rolled a 2, so that drops.
So you are also a D4, or you do 6?
D6.
D6. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
As you are all trying to handle this the best that you can, the voice returns. But this time, it is not a whisper that is simply echoing within your head. It is a voice that is reverberant in this space and is reaching out to you. And when you look for the source, you see ahead of you that there is this towering, strange object and that enveloping feeling washes over you anew. This large metallic looking cube is draped with fragments of broken something, chains, cables, kind of holding it in place, this organic growth even trying to overtake it. This cube pulls you forward. It's beckoning to you to draw closer.
I think something in Hakuro at this point is, despite that like innate panic that's still there within us, within everyone, some level of intrigue that he can't shake. I think is like why his sanity might not be like falling in the same way that some of the others have been. There's something about it that like feels right. That buzz of energy that's filled him from Astra and now from curiosity seems to tug on him in a strange way. That despite him being afraid of it, is also simultaneously like spellbound by it. And I'll begin to like walk towards it, like just trudging barely, like trying to get a feel for his legs and his own body. His hands are like resting on each other on like the forearms of the other arm. It's like strange to him. It's been so long since he's like felt even like his own body from outside of the armor. So like to have like his own like hands touching his own body is like a very strange, almost new sensation, despite the fact that it's like not entirely new, but it's so novel that it might as well be. And just this like strange, entrancing stew of all these new sensations, these like strange sights, this like now novel touch sensation, and then this like inexplicable draw towards this call. I think he like can't help but start to like walk towards it. It was like a moth to a flame, more so than any like conscious effort.
I think that upon hearing this, Vivian would go over to Kelvin, and you'd feel kind of this cold touch on your shoulder. You should come. It calls to us now. And you can see if you look up at her, she's trying to smile reassuringly, but her eyes are just filled with fear and confusion and madness, essentially.
I think looking back over his shoulder, he reaches up and he reaches for your hand, the one that's on his shoulder. And he reaches with the same hand that's been digging at his flesh. So there's this bloody hand that reaches up. It has to end. And he lets his hand sort of trail down your arm to your fingertips, where it lingers for, in another situation, in his normal grimy clothes, would have been an uncomfortable amount of time. And he stands himself up. And instinctively sort of reaches for where that handgun, that holster would be. And then, not having it, looks back towards this machine that just spit him out, looking for a lever or a bar or a conduit that could be ripped off and turned into a makeshift club. And finding a piece of conduit that's there, there's that back and forth before you hear that of a piece of metal being broken off. I have some words.
And as you rip this piece of pipe, Kelvin, there's this of this brightly purple-colored gas But as you look down at this pipe, you find your pulsar in your hand.
He thrusts this, depending on how you see it, pipe or pulsar into your face, Vivian. What do you see?
Does Vivian see the pulsar, or is it just She frowns and she looks from you to the pulsar and back up to you. How did you do that?
And again, with that bloody hand, he clasps the back of your neck to pull you closer, to tell you the secret, because they're still in our head. Like
Vivian,
that's supposed to explain everything.
Vivian, as you look at him, you notice that he is no longer this naked form. That you see the belongings that you recognize as Kelvin's on his person again. And Kelvin, as you have pulled Vivian closer, you see the same with her.
I think at this, Vivian would look at you and just begin to laugh. You figured it out. Guys, he figured it out. And she's calling to the rest of the people.
Noelle looks over. Do I see what they see?
Yes, you do. You see them dressed and with their belongings.
What? I don't understand. Could I borrow your jacket?
As you say that, Noelle, and you kind of reach out, you look down at your arm. What does the sleeve of your own jacket look like?
It's old, gray, kind of torn up in places.
You see that jacket on your arm. You're wearing it. And when you look down, you too are dressed and have all of your belongings with you.
Look,
Noelle
you
just
see?
stares.
You see it? It's not real. You see?
Noelle calls out to Hikaru, who hasn't introduced himself. Hey! You're not naked!
Yeah, Hakuro will like spin around at the sight of like all this like yelling and the commotion that's like come from the other people. And he'll like look down at his own hands, like half expecting to like continue to see hands, but then like also half expecting to like see the familiar like iron plating that he's so used to wearing. And like take a step towards them. I'm not sure if he'll hear a metallic clang or a dull thud.
You step forward and you feel the heavy magnetic lock of your boots making contact with the metallic floor. As you look down and you watch, like plate by plate almost, this armor appears onto your body.
Yeah, definitely after seeing all this, like, first thing Zach would start doing is like patting his chest and his shoulders, because like a while ago everybody was naked and we come out of this tube, so trying to make sense of it. And
You pat yourself down and find again your clothes and your belongings on you and where you would normally carry them. And kind of, looking and turning around, you don't see these giant machines back behind you. You're in some kind of more like a natural cave that is surrounded and pierced by these large, jagged pieces of metal all around you. And this towering cube looms before you, pulsing with this magenta astra color.
Is this thing, and why is it fucking with us?
The cube speaks. And you recognize it as the voice that has been whispering in your head for days now. The cube says, "A hungering darkness is consuming your world. The window to arrest this outcome is quickly closing. It encroaches even now. You must save your world. You must take me to the lamplighters."
why us?
It is you who has been chosen.
Where are the lamplighters?
You will find them when you find them.
And how can we be sure that we can trust you, that this isn't a trick, that the darkness that you speak of is not yourself attempting to free yourself from something that binds you instead of the other way around?
If you do not wish to undertake this charge, then you may walk away.
Hakura will like take a step back at that, like quite literally, as if like this thing had attacked him by saying that. It was like so unexpected that he would just be told that he could leave at any point, that he like doesn't know what to make of that, and it's kind of like look to the others for some sort of like reassurance or.
Walk away where? Trapped in here? Or back to our lives?
You are not trapped in any way except for in your own mind. The things that I can show you are beyond your comprehension. This communication is the only way that you could understand me.
So at that, a starter's like hand with the pulsar like just lurches forward, and the tattoo of his wife, which is now marred from him tearing through his own flesh, and he just bellows, "You fucking used her!" And then it's just blah 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 blah, and just everything the gun has at this cube. Probably doing a whole lot of nothing, but he's angry.
Noel ducks down to avoid the oncoming fire.
You unleash on this cube the projectiles from your gun, boring holes and dinging off of its surface, definitely doing damage to it. The other 4 of you, please roll your sanity die. You feel this intense mental feedback as this shooting pain courses through your skull.
Got a 1.
Okay. And you were, you're a D4 now.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Okay. Hakuro's good. Zach is barely good, but good.
I got a 3.
You got a 3? Okay, so likewise, barely, but still good. Okay. So as he's doing this, with each of these shots, you feel like nerve damage. Like if you've ever had like a tooth that has gotten impacted or something like that, where this raw exposed nerve, only instead of it being anywhere else in your body, it's directly in the center of your brain. Every shot causes this electrical pulse of like shooting pain to course through your mind. And most of you are able to handle it, to deal with it. However, Vivian, this takes you to your knees, and there's probably blood coming out of either your ears, your nose, something to that effect. But what does that look like for Vivian?
I imagine Vivian screams. And at first, and she falls and she covers like her head, her eyes. She doesn't know what to cover to stop the pain. And you hear her try to say something, but it comes out as just this garbledness in amidst this screaming and mumbling and just, but eventually she screams stop. And she's looking, and then she kind of slumps down. Her hands, her eyes are looking down. Her hands are just bloody. And tears are combining with the blood and just running down her face. And she begins to just kind of rock back and forth, and almost like just through instinct, she takes a bit of the blood on her hands and she begins to draw a shape on the floor. And it is of that face.
So,
as she's just crying and weeping and rocking back and forth.
I think with the scream and her collapsing to the ground, that the pulsar falls from the starter's hands, and he sees her, and he sees her bleeding and weeping, and he rushes to her and collapses beside her, and not touching her, but just inches from her. Sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't know it was you. I didn't mean to shoot you, Lila. I didn't mean to hurt you.
Hakura will like turn, like see just the chaos that's happened so quickly. Within the span of seconds. We went from like fine to just like utter panic and pain. I'll just like shake his head, like his hand up, like on his helmet, from like the stab that's already gone through his mind too. It wasn't just her. When you shot that thing, I felt it too. A sting in my own head. Like I had been stabbed, but only inside my brain. What the fuck? Something about us, it must be connected. I don't know. 'Cause I felt it too. Not as bad, clearly, I like say, like looking down at the two of you. We need to be careful. Fuck.
So I look back at him, Star looks back at him, and there's these eyes of someone who's not there looking at you. I didn't mean to hurt her. I didn't know she was
know.
there.
I know, you didn't
I
mean
didn't
to.
mean to kill her.
It's okay. Kind of like put a hand on your shoulder, like a cold metallic feel instead of like the comforting human one of the armor. You need to try to hold it together. We need to figure out what's happening. You have to stay with us. I know you didn't mean to hurt her. It's okay. We're all okay. We're going to be okay.
She's dead. I killed her.
Right there.
She's never coming back. Except when I close my eyes, she's always there. She'll never be back and she'll never leave.
Should we do? Noelle kind of looks to all of you. There's just us in this gigantic cube.
Probably do whatever he wants so that way we can get out of here. I'm pretty sure none of us want this.
Take me to the lamplighters, and you will all be released.
How?
I will set you free. Is anybody thinking about taking this? Even the thought crossing your mind as a character?
Yes, the thought definitely goes through Hakuro's mind.
Okay. Anybody who's thinking about taking this object, I need you to choose intelligence, wisdom, or charisma, and make me a saving throw, please.
I'm going to use my
Charisma for me.
inspiration.
Okay. Sorry, Jeff, what'd you say?
I'm going to go with charisma, and that's going to be a 22.
Okay.
I got a 1 with wisdom and I got a 21.
Excellent. Okay.
Intelligence, dirty 20.
Okay.
I got a 17 for charisma.
17. Okay. And Steve, you are not contemplating taking this, is what I'm assuming?
The only thing that a starter's thinking about is shooting himself.
Ooh. Yeah, that's also an option. All right. So Hakuro, Zach, and Noelle, the moment that you give any real thought or credence to thinking about taking this object, you look down and you find a version of this cube, smaller, fits inside the palm of your hand, sitting there already. Vivian, you likewise find one of these cubes in your hand. However, I need you to roll a d10 again on the Madness Effects table.
Oh boy, oh boy. That is a 2 again. So,
Reroll, if you would.
yeah. Oh my goodness. That was another 2. Okay. Another die.
Okay.
That's a 7.
You find it impossible to concentrate. You will critically fail all d20 rolls on a result of 1 or 2 until you complete a rest.
Yeah, she is kind of holding it, but I don't know if she even registers at this point. She's still just weeping and just drawing now more finer detail into this face that she's kind of painted on the ground.
The 4 of you who attempted this, who now have a version of this cube with you, please roll your sanity die.
One.
I got a 4.
Okay. Emily, what was your die whenever you rolled it?
D8. Am I D6
Okay.
now?
So, yeah, you're a D6 now. Okay. Jeff is also at a D6. Okay. And what did you get, Megan?
Oh, sorry.
You're good.
That is a 3.
Okay. Still with us. All right. So the 4 of you now find these cubes in your hands. And quite suddenly, all of you are back on the street, staring down into this puddle that now is reflecting each of you.
Are the cubes still in our hands? Noelle quickly stuffs it into her jacket. Ugh. Now, who the hell are these lamplighters?
Everyone, if you would please roll me a perception check.
Do I get disadvantage, right?
Yes, I think that's what the first one that you got was. Yes, disadvantage on perception until you complete a rest. So yeah.
Okay, just making sure.
Thank you.
7.
So that for me is the big old nat 20.
Oh, there you go. Holy shit. Okay, Kelvin and Hakuro absolutely notice. And I would say that Zach and Noelle, you probably also notice. However, Vivian, you're not paying enough attention. But the rest of you, as you say this, Noelle, you kind of look over and you notice a neon sign that was dark that kind of flickers and lights up. And it is a picture of an old styled oil lamp.
This feels too easy to me. Too convenient.
He said we could leave. He said we could go, and it would set us free. We could just go. We could leave.
And I lock eyes with you momentarily and then point down at your hand. And then you took one of those.
I didn't. It was just the thought, and she's gonna drop it. Like, it's almost as if she's surprised that she has it in her hand.
Set us free can have a lot of meanings. Fuck it. Noelle starts walking over to the sign.
I don't know about you guys, and feel free to make your own choice. I wouldn't begrudge you for leaving, never coming back. Hell, part of me wants to do the same thing. But if I don't get any answers from this, at least some sense of closure, whatever that means, I don't fucking know. If I don't get something, it'll nag at me until the second that I die. I'd rather it control me for an hour now than for the rest of my existence, wondering what the fuck happened. I can't stop now. I have to know. And if you don't, then that's fine. Please, do yourselves a favor. Get out while you can. But I'm going to go.
Yeah, Zach wouldn't even think twice. He would look at this cube in his hand and start walking forward. He wants this thing like gone out of his head.
What's it gonna be? And Stutter's standing
Vivian.
there looking at you, and you can see blood dripping out from his sleeve, down his hand, across the barrel of the gun.
Vivian just stares at the cube on the ground. For a really long time, and just whispers, "He said we could leave."
Vivian, though the cube has been at rest for a moment after having fallen out of your hand, it tumbles one last time, as if still under the inertia of the drop. And when you look, you see that it tumbled once in the direction of this sign.
Does she still see that? She still sees that, like, figure in her peripheral. He's always going to be there, isn't he? That was a lie, I think. I think that was a lie. As she kind of looks at the cube. Just, okay, all right. We'll go. I'll go.
I think in the exact moment that you reach for the cube, a starter also reaches for the cube. And when you ask, when you say he'll always be there, he stops and, yeah, she'll always be there. And he'll help you back to your feet again.
I think Vivian would just give you this knowing nod of, like, if this doesn't pan out, even if it does pan out, there seems to be only kind of one out that's coming up. And she kind of gives you that knowing nod. Let's at least get an answer first. In, like, a moment of clarity, she looks at you.
The five of you
Mom.
approach. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I think Hakuro would just kind of like put a hand on the two of your shoulders and like turn you in the direction of the sign. Just kind of give a slow single nod. Come on, let's get this over with. Hopefully out of our minds.
You walk to where this sign is. You see that it's got a small arrow that points you down an alleyway back behind more forward-facing shops. You go down this alleyway and you find another door. This one emblazoned with the same neon sign that you saw out on the street. This door, it looks like a shop door, but this is made out of like reinforced orichalcum. This is a seriously stout door. You see a small keypad with a glancer screen beside it, as well as a small camera lens pointed directly at the stoop.
I think Zach would take out the cube out of his trench coat and put it right in front of it and look at the camera, like pointing at it, like, you know what this is?
This voice crackles. Who the hell are you?
Who the hell are you?
Look, you're knocking on my door. What do you want?
We were told to bring you this.
Told by who?
You wouldn't believe me if we told you.
You could say a bigger one. And Noelle holds up her cube. Said lamplighters. This is the place, right?
You hear an immediate like noise, and you hear and feel this kind of like release inside the door. Come in.
Noelle opens the door and steps on in.
You step inside and you find yourself in like an armored foyer, like this check room, if you will. It's lined with more orichalcum, and there's another large door that leads further into this place. And behind a shield of like pure green Astra, this brilliant green light kind of bathing everything in the room, is a woman who is part machine, just judging by the multitude of pieces of her that are not covered in flesh. She kind of stares at all of you, and you can see there's a hint of familiar madness in her eyes. She's busy working on several of these screens that are kind of disembodied, floating elsewhere. Once the last of you has entered, the door closes behind you. You've heard a voice? You too?
Yeah. It's told us to come to you.
I was told that there might be some of you coming by. None of you are CCPD? Cops? Any of you?
Far from it.
Hakuro will just laugh.
All right then. You brought me something important, yes?
Noelle puts down her cube in front of her.
She slides this like two-way drawer, this kind of thing you see in like a bank or like an armored convenience store, so that she doesn't have to directly expose herself to you at all. She kind of pushes this thing in, so it's got this place where you can drop your cube if you wish. If you go ahead and put it in here, if you would.
Okay. Noelle drops it in.
Noelle, you drop your cube in, and as it falls from your hand, you realize that it's not one of these cubes. It's a Lorium vial. The glass of the Lorium vial kind of falls and clink, clink, clink down into this metallic drawer. You can see the glowing astra of the stored information inside of this Lorium vial.
What? I hope you have an explanation for all of this. This is driving me crazy.
She kind of looks at you as if she doesn't really understand 100% what you're talking about. And she says, I'm not a place for answers, I'm afraid.
Hakuro will hold out his hand so that his hand is like directly over the drawer, like holding the cube between his two fingers. Like just as he's about to like let go, he'll like stop for a moment and like look back up and like bring it back up so that it's like showing it to this person. What is this for? What is this trying to accomplish? Why are we doing this? What will happen if I give this to you?
I think it will be finished. This voice, this madness, I hope at least.
How do we know that this is right? That we're not doing something terrible?
I have been awake for 2 weeks, writing code that I don't understand. I only know that I need the information that is on the vials that you have to finish what I have started and be done with it. I don't understand it, but I need to sleep. I need it to stop. So, please, help me fight back this darkness.
Hakuro will look to the other two that still have cubes to see if they put theirs in.
Yeah, Zach would slowly, but he would go like, I guess here goes nothing, and he would drop it in there.
This is gonna end. No matter what. It's gonna end. And she puts the cube / Lorium vial into this container.
You likewise see it change before your eyes from a cube into this Lorium vial.
At this point, the manicness has gone from her and she just looks tired. Still not all there, but just tired.
Did Hakuro drop it in?
Not yet. He keeps like looking at the cube, like unsure. There's like this hesitation that like washes over him. Like he was so confident in his decision to like walk to this place to see this through, to get answers. And yet here they are, handing over data after like hearing this woman's story of like her own insanity that's followed her. He like can't help but now as he stands here like wonder what it's all for, and like what good or what tear that it might be doing. And, like he doesn't know which is which in this scenario, if walking away is stopping good or if it's stopping evil. But he'll look to the others and see that they've all placed theirs. Just kind of like shake his head. And like place his hand over. And for like much longer than necessary, his hand like hover over the box, unsure. Then he'll like squint his eyes and his face like as if in pain when he finally drops the cube in, as if like expecting an explosion will happen, like it's lighting the fuse of a bomb as he drops the vial in the container.
Vivian is going to, when he does this, Vivian is going to lean over in a very kind of low voice. If not us, then someone else, and our pain will not end.
Yeah, the words are like simultaneously like very comforting and very disconcerting to Hakuro all at the same time. This thought of like, it doesn't matter if we do or don't, because like it's inevitable that this happens, is like comforting. But the thought of like this bearing, that if this goes wrong, that they would bear this pain forever, no matter what. That if they do or if they don't, like no matter what, that they're doomed to suffer. It's like simultaneously relieving and also agonizing to hear the words. He doesn't know whether to like shake his head in agreement or just like shake it no and like miss.
As the last of the 4 cubes that you have brought is dropped into this drawer, she looks relieved and slides the drawer in and collects them. She says, "Thank you. Thank you for freeing me." And she then presses the door release button to let you back outside. As she does so, she looks to all of you and she says, she looks down at these gathered Lorium vials in her hand. She says, "The voice has said that all of you should leave Chrome City quickly." Just then, outside, you hear the approaching wail of sirens as the CCPD is closing in.
Son of a bitch. Are they like right there, or are they like coming in from a distance?
Not here yet, but they're close enough that the gut instinct tells you they're probably approaching for you.
Son of a bitch.
Akira will just like immediately begin to like sprint for the door. He's not wasting a single second here once he hears the sirens and once he hears that sound effect of them getting closer and like the sound distorting as they move like quickly towards the location. He'll immediately begin running. Given his past and his profession, there's a lot at stake for him getting caught by them, and he would much rather not.
Same for Noel.
Yeah, Seth will run and he will reach out for his whisperling and he will send a message to like one of his contacts so that way they can have like a ship that is not it doesn't have any, you know, plates or anything that can get him out of the planet without, you know, people knowing.
Does Vivian still see that figure, that shadowy figure in her peripheral?
Yes, for the time being.
She just looks down, tears in her eyes. She just kind of mutters, I'm going home now. To no one in particular, just kind of says it out loud. And she would start walking in that direction.
So Hakara took off, right? He's going to be hard to catch. Zach's beating feet and already in contact with someone to get him out of a bad situation. You know, the other young woman with us seemed rather calm and cool when we were in the middle of the cockpits in a dogfight. Like, she can handle herself. And then Starter turns and looks and sees Vivian walking up the street. Like, there's no way that she's going to be out of eyesight before CCPD pulls up. So he looks towards her and his bloody arm, smiles, pulls his gun out of his vest, and starts walking towards the sirens.
The five of you scatter or approach. And then suddenly, you're elsewhere. You're boarding this void ship on your trip that had taken you from Chrome City in the first place. Days, weeks ago now. You're boarding this ship for the first time to leave on this trip. And as you settle into your seats with this uncomfortable feeling of whether you're reliving a memory or whether you had some kind of prophecy or vision, you close your eyes for a moment to try to still your mind. And as you reopen them, you look around and realize that you are indeed on a void ship. However, this is not a pleasure cruise of any kind. You're in the back of a military-grade vessel. Each one of you strapped into a complicated chair. Each one of you is a Forgeborn. You have enough time to kind of look at one another, realize this fact, this familiarity in the faces you see around you. However, it's not the same person. It's a machine made to look like a person. You receive a flash, a vision, a fragment of the truth. You see this woman who you gave these Lorium vials to, laid out in front of the screens she was working on. And standing behind her, behind this broken glancer screen, with a weapon drawn, this woman's murderer. Each one of you sees yourself. And as that happens, this device descends from the ceiling of this small military vessel and approaches you, kind of blocking the light of the room as it comes closer to your forehead. And this cable opens into these snaking tentacle-like devices that wrap around your head to wipe your memory and implant new false ones for your next mission. And that is the game. So, thank you very, very much, everyone, for playing in this fantastic game. I'm so happy with the way that this has turned out. Thank you for anyone who has been watching. I'm going to toss this over to my players so that they can give their parting thoughts and plug whatever they'd like to plug. And then we'll put a bow on it, call it done. So first up, Steve.
So I'm Steve. Thanks for having me, Jeremy. I always enjoy playing in your games. Really great to play with all of you. I think the only person I've ever played with before is Megan, once a long time ago. And it was a pleasure. You guys are all awesome. I really enjoyed the game. So thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely a pleasure, Steve. You're part of one of my campaigns, so I get to play with you fairly frequently. And it was nice to kind of step out of our usual campaign and see a little something different. And this was fantastic. So thank you very much for being a part of it. Next up, we have Emily.
Wow. That was one hell of an experience. Oh my gosh. That was great. It was great role play, great visuals. It was awesome, Jeremy. Thank you for having me on board. Thank you guys for sharing this experience. Yay.
Like I said, this was the first time that I've had the pleasure of having you in a game, Emily, but it was fantastic. Thank you very much for taking part in this weird and trippy, hopefully disturbing ride. Next up, Jose.
Hey, thanks again for letting me in the game. That was fun. That was nuts. Like, I wasn't expecting all of that. And yeah, it was definitely great. And Steve, you and Megan, man, the role play was pretty nuts. So thank you. It was fun.
Awesome as always, Jose. It's been a little while since you and I have managed to play together, from what I can recall, and it's definitely been a long while since I've managed to run a game for you. So it was awesome to have you back. Not only back, but back in Chrome City, for hopefully what was a very different experience than the last time.
Yeah, definitely was.
Fantastic. Awesome. All right, next up is Jeff.
Yeah, that was a really interesting. It's not often that you see the double matrix reveal happen in a game, so it was very impressive to think that you've made it through the other side of the inception, just to find out that you're still ever stuck inside of it. But yeah, it's always interesting in a game of 5e how much it changes by not having like the normal like combat encounter, so to speak, that happens. And that's obviously not a bad thing, because it opens up so much more ground that you can cover in other areas that I think sometimes, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love me a good fight. I'll rock a good combat till the end. But it's strange how much the session starts to breathe and open up in a different way when you can use that, 45 minutes to an hour to keep furthering the events that are happening in the game instead of like being locked into that mechanical angle. It was really interesting to kind of see how it felt, and it felt very different from a normal 5e game, even though it was all the same rules. Yeah, always a pleasure to play in a Jeremy game. They're some of the best on the market, so I'm thrilled to have been here. First time in Chrome City. Something tells me I didn't get the full the standard experience of what that setting is like, but I had a fantastic time with it nonetheless. Great players, great GM. Hard to go wrong with that.
Excellent, Jeff. Thank you very much, man. I appreciate that. It's always a pleasure to have you in a game. It doesn't matter the setting or the genre. You knock it out of the park. And it's always you always seem to understand what I'm going for as a GM and do what you can to support it, which is very, very nice. It makes for a very easy experience as a GM. All right, last but certainly not least, Megan.
You know that you are in a fantastic game when you know that you're going to be spending hours afterwards just trying to pick apart everything that happened and all the ending and then all the other things and just trying to make sense of it all. So it left me kind of like, what, just blown away. So that was so much fun, and it was so much fun to get to play with all these people. Some I think Emily is the only one I have yet to play with, so thank you. That was really great. Awesome game. So thank you so much. I love me a good thriller horror. So that was awesome. I know, surprising. Who would have thought?
It was fantastic. Yeah, I know that you're a big fan. Oh, for fuck's sakes! I know you're a big fan of spooky, get in your head kind of games. And you recently ran one that I was in Harbinger as well. So I'm glad that I was able to return at least a small part of the favor. Well, everyone, thank you very, very much. You guys were awesome. And I had a lot of fun taking this different approach to Chrome City and Harbinger. And yeah, thank you very much for anyone who may have watched. Thank you for anyone who's going to watch in the future. I appreciate it. Thank you again very much, Megan, for setting up the Zoom at the last minute, because what the hell is going on elsewhere. So I guess, get ready to take us out, because I'm going to throw my slogan out there as I always do. Until next time, may your dice roll high and your snacks always be within reach.